Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on from where you are joining us today for this DipIFR InFocus webinar. That's the support for June 2025 exams. My name is Richa and I work as Education Support Manager at ACCA. So our session, Examiners Report Unlocked, it is designed to help you with upcoming exam preparation. And today, Jane Hosen has joined us to impart DIP IFR knowledge to you. So during this session, Jane will share key insights from the examiner's report. She will also take you through detailed technical examples to enhance your knowledge and skills about the paper. Jane will also share some practical advice to you to maximize June 2025 exam preparations again. So this session, it is an opportunity to gain practical advice to maximize your learning for the June 25 exams. And towards the end, we will definitely be having some time for dedicated live Q&A session as well. So before I hand over to Jane, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items very quickly. At the bottom of your screen, you will see there are a number of buttons which you can use for yourself. There is a help icon which provides resources and information if you have any technical issues during the session. Then there are icons of both slides and media player. So you will need both of them during the webinar. So make sure that you have selected them. There is an attendee chat function also where you can engage with your fellow webinar attendees, but please be mindful that you should not be sharing any of your personal details on the chat. Then you will also be finding a resource list icon. That's a file-like symbol. And if you click on this, you will be able to access resources which are very much relevant to today's webinar, including all the direct links. You can rearrange the screen to suit you and resize the windows if you need to. And if at any point you cannot hear us or what we are saying, so don't worry, or you are not able to see any visuals, do refresh your browser. Registering for the session means that you will be sent an email tomorrow with details like how you can listen to it again. So don't worry if you miss something during the webinar due to any technical issues, you will be able to access the recording as well. So I am now going to hand over to Jane in a moment and we'll be back with you towards the end of the session. So in the meantime, if you want to ask ACCA any question, so please post them in Q&A section. And kindly note that we cannot guarantee responding to everyone directly, either verbally or via web chat, but we hope that the questions we will share with you will be helpful to each one of you. So handing over to you, Jane, now.
Thank you, Richa. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jane Howson. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I'm a qualified chartered accountant. I trained many years ago with Coopers & Lybrand, that's now PwC. But I've been in exam-based training for over 30 years. And for that, I do cover a lot of ACCA questions. My subject specialisms do include financial reporting. I've also got a little bit of background knowledge as well on some performance management and financial management as well as tax. So let's crack on today and have a little look at the key insights and what we're going to be doing today. So the way that this session is going to work out, as Richard explained earlier, we're going to have a look first of all at what the examiner has said in their most recent report. And what I've been doing here is looking at broadly the December 2024 one, where the examiner has come up with the same sorts of issues that they come up with on a lot of exams in the past. So we need to reiterate those. And I'm going to talk about the common pitfalls so that you don't repeat them, and also have a look at some of the technical points that the examiner has said that students are lacking in places, and we do need to make sure that we cover those. What we're then going to do is have a look at some examples. Now, in this session, I don't have time to go through a detailed consolidated statement of financial position or statement of profit or loss, but we can look at some of the issues that the examiner has raised and maybe try and apply some knowledge that we have to some of the written elements. What we also want to do is to make sure that we understand where we need to go from now up to the exam, because the exam's about a month away, and we need to think about how we're going to plan our time to make sure that when we're working, time is a little bit precious. We just need to make sure that we've got enough time to be able to prepare properly. At the end, we'll have some questions and answers. I can see some are coming in already, which is excellent. And we'll answer as many of those as we possibly can. So let's have a look at this December 2024 examiner's report. And in particular, let's look at exactly what the examiner has been saying. Now, I'm going to start first of all by having a quick reminder for those of you who may not have sat this paper before and don't know what to expect in a lot of detail. Let's just think a little bit about what the exam questions are likely to be sort of on and what the structure is. So the first question here will always be a preparation of a consolidated statement of profit or loss or a statement of financial position. Now, what's quite important here is that I can't second guess which one's going to come up. Sometimes it's a statement of financial position, sometimes it's a statement of profit or loss. What I can tell you is that it will be for 25 marks. The examiner will give you a pre-populated spreadsheet and will expect you to prepare the financial statements with that. You can expect to have or be tested on some very basic consolidation techniques, but also they may bring in a couple of adjustments into the financial statements so that you do need to then consider how to amend some figures. One thing that is crystal clear that the examiner says is please don't give me any explanations. I just want you to prepare the financial statements. The next point is, or the next question, is always got some ethics in it. Usually the ethics are a maximum of 5 marks. The examiner has said that this isn't always answered well, so we are going to come back and have a look at this in a moment. But you are going to be given some specific transactions that somebody in your workplace has suggested should be accounted for in a certain way. You might need to correct those and then discuss the ethical implications that arise from those mistakes. Usually there's a bit of a theme and fudge the accounts in some way. Question number 3 is usually one that's got some transactions in there. They might be all on one accounting standard and you have different accounting transactions relating to that. You might have different accounting transactions relating to different standards. You will be expected to explain accounting principles and also maybe prepare some numbers to go into the financial statements. It is not about preparing a list of journals. It is not about preparing some financial statements. It's about discussing. And the last question is always purely written. It's going to be usually you'll get a director that's attended a seminar or they've been reading a newspaper and they're a little bit confused about some of the accounting principles that we tend to use in the financial statements. And they're going to expect us to comment on those and to explain what's going on. Tell me why we do this. So purely written. So question number 1, question number 2, and question number 3, you will be given both a spreadsheet. Well, question number 1 will be a spreadsheet. Question number 2 and 3, you'll be given a spreadsheet and you'll be given a word processor so that you've got some written and some numerical aspects. Question number 4, the paper has just a word processor, so you'll be typing out your answer. All questions are worth 25 marks. So if you have a 3-hour paper, well, 3 hour 15, but allowing for 15 minutes of reading time, you're looking at spending about 45 minutes doing on each of those questions. You have to get your timing right. Now, one common thing, some common pitfalls that the examiner has highlighted in their recent report. Now, these are things that I just need to point out now so you don't do this. The first one is looking at spreadsheet functionality. I have to remind you that you are given spreadsheets for question 1, question 2, and question 3. It is not Excel. The function is very similar to Excel. It is not identical to Excel. And one thing that you will find is it's not very easy to insert lines. So you really need to think about your presentation and how things are going to be set out in your answer. Now, in question number 1, you're given a pre-populated spreadsheet. Now, the reason that you're given that is that one of the functions that you have is to be able to sum, equals sum, and you can add across and add down. Use it. The examiner has set the mark allocation, assuming that that's what you're going to do to save yourself some time. So use those spreadsheet functions in the exam. It demonstrates a skill, which is one of the things that the examiner is looking for. Now, if you're a little bit unsure or you've not seen one of these spreadsheets, go to the ACCA platform. There is a range of past exam papers on there which you can practice. And also, if you go to the ACCA website, you'll see the examiner has actually given you some guides on how to use that platform spreadsheet. The next issue that the examiner has had a little moan about is the lack of workings. Now, you'll understand that when you do a spreadsheet, there is the ability to click on a cell and see the workings in there. And in fact, the marker, when they're marking any spreadsheets, can do that. They can see what your formula was to put the numbers together. But the problem with that is they don't understand your thought process. And if they don't know why you've done that and you've done it wrong, they can't attribute any marks to you at all if they don't understand what you're trying to do. So the examiner has suggested that candidates should cross-reference all of their workings for these cells. Just explain what you're doing with the number in the cell. And that's going to make the marker find it a lot easier to show or to award marks when you're trying to demonstrate what you're doing. The other little moan that the examiner tends to have is on written explanations. Now, you have to remember that what we're doing here is in questions 2, 3, and 4, we're going to have people that we're trying to communicate with. We're the experts here on how to deal with financial statements. Somebody is coming to us and saying, help, I don't know how to account for this. What you're not going to do is just give a list of journals with no explanation whatsoever. You have to imagine that you're explaining it to somebody. So you're going to talk about why you're doing something. And usually a really good way of setting this out to get some nice structure to your answer is maybe to think about what the particular accounting standard says about a transaction. You know, I've read the standard. It tells me that I need to deal with this in this way. And when you do that, you're then stating the facts, apply it to your scenario. So you're saying in this particular situation, we need to do this, this, and this. By all means, put a few journals down at that point to explain what the transactions are, because that is then concluding and explaining what needs to be done. But what the examiner does gets a little bit tired of just wading through numbers and calculations with no explanation about why you're doing them at all. And what they'll do is give you no marks if the numbers are wrong and they can't follow your thought process. So as I said, state the standard, apply it, conclude maybe by explaining the journal entries or what you need to do with it. Now remember as well that often in these questions, and we're going to see this when we look at some examples in a while, often in these questions, the examiner will also say to you, what do I do with these? How do I measure them? Where do I put them? So you're going to get marks for saying, and once you've got this number, it's going to go into the statement of financial position as a current asset. And you will get credit for putting that in. So remember, explanations need measurement quite often and presentation. Now, the next thing that the examiner says that students don't do terribly well is answer the part on ethics. Question 2, maximum 5 marks. There will be 5 marks awarded for ethics. Now, when we're talking about ethics, there's one really important thing we have to remember. Quite often, the person that we're dealing with that's making all the mistakes or suggesting mistakes is possibly somebody who has a financial background and might be a member of the ACCA. And what we have to call out is bad behavior. So we need to think about what the ethical code says. And what the examiner says that students do is simply list all the 5 principles of the ethical code. And he's not looking for that. What the examiner's looking for is for you to identify the common ethical issues that relate to this particular scenario. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the scenario itself, work out of the 5 principles of the code, which ones are being breached, and comment on those. Now, I'm going to go through a little example with you later on where we're going to see a scenario, and I'm going to explain to you where you get your 5 marks from. And what you'll see in that example is I am not listing the principles of the code and leaving it at that. That will not get you 5 marks. The last little point that the examiner seems to be getting a little bit grumpy about is the fact that we're not always reading the question fully. Now, what we mean by that is that sometimes, especially in question 4 actually, but it could be in other questions as well, the examiner is asking you for several things in one sentence. And if you don't read that requirement fully, you are not going to get all of the marks available in the exam. So what you need to do here is to make sure that you've read the requirement and listed all the things that you need to do to maximize your chance of passing. You can also argue down here that sometimes when you're not reading the question fully, it may be that you're only half doing it, and so you're missing out one great chunk of calculations. Now, next thing that I want to have a look at is a few technical points that you absolutely have to concentrate on before you're going to sit down and start doing your exam. Now, the first one that I want to mention down here, I'm coming back to this principle of ethical code, folks. I'm really sorry. But I am going to mention that there are 5 aspects of the ethical code. You have to show integrity. That's being honest. You have to be objective. That means not being biased. You have to demonstrate professional behavior. You have to act like people would expect a certified accountant to act. You have to demonstrate professional competence and due care, which means that you should never take on work that you don't know how to do, and you are expected to have reached a certain level of competence and know how to account for certain transactions. And finally, you need to be confidential. Now, in an exam question, remember I said to you, maximum 5 marks here. You are not going to get 5 marks for listing the 5 principles of the code. And if you then have to explain a little bit, you may find that not all 5 aspects of the code are actually relevant here in this particular example. So identify the ones that are relevant. Sometimes confidentiality is the one that's missed, and sometimes the professional competence might be the one that's missed. So what you need to do is to call out the aspects specifically of the behavior, and linked into that, try and identify the threats that leave you to think that the code is being breached. Consider self-interest threat. You know, there's something in it for me if I do something wrong. Think about self-review. How can I be objective when I'm reviewing my own work? And also think about intimidation. Is there somebody out there that's bullying me into try and make mistakes in terms of the accounting? So we're going to have a little example of that in a moment. The second issue that we get here is consolidation principles. In consolidation principles, there are some absolutely fundamental basic points that you have to get right. And these 2 points that you have to get right is understanding the difference between control, when I control a subsidiary, and when I own it. Control is demonstrated by adding 100% of the parent's financial transactions to those of the subsidiary, regardless of the level of ownership that I have. If I have over 50%, I add 100%. Now, if I've not had that subsidiary for a full year, I still have to include 100% at the year end in the statement of financial position, because the statement of financial position is a snapshot at a point in time. And that tells me that at this point in time, I control 100%. In the statement of profit or loss, I may find that if I've had a mid-year acquisition, I can't include a full year's amount of the subsidiaries' figures in my financial statements. So I may prorate a statement of profit or loss. If I want to demonstrate ownership in the statement of P&L and the statement of financial position, ownership is demonstrated in the equity section of the statement of financial position by saying these are the group elements of equity, shares and reserves, and this much belongs to the non-controlling interest. In a statement of profit or loss, we're going to demonstrate that split of ownership under the profits attributable to at the bottom of the P&L. Now, that is absolutely fundamental knowledge, regardless of all the other adjustments that you need to do. So fix that in your mind first of all. Then consider there are some basic calculations that the examiner will award generously for. Knowing how to calculate goodwill, knowing how to calculate non-controlling interest in a P&L and a statement of financial position. There will also be marks available for adjustments. Do you know how to deal with provisions for unrealized profit? Do you know how to make fair value adjustments on acquisition? Now, these will come up in some format somewhere in the exam. So make sure that to get your 25 marks, or as many of the 25 marks you can, you at least look at those basics. Understanding those principles will get you a pass mark. Knowing how to deal with it absolutely spot on is going to get you 25 marks. Now, the next thing that we want to have a look at is thinking about the technical content and the application of the accounting standards. And one question I get asked quite a lot is, do I need to learn the names and numbers of the accounting standards? And I would say, actually, I don't think that is as important as knowing what the standard says. And the examiner's not looking for you to learn it off by heart. You can't do that. There are loads of accounting standards, but you can get the gist of what the accounting standard says. And what you have to do, especially in questions 2 and 3, and sometimes in question 4, is you need to say, I know there's an accounting standard on that particular principle, and the accounting standard says this. Now, you're not going to get full marks if all you do is state the facts of what the accounting standard says. I need you to come up with some application. You need to tell me how that standard applies to this particular situation. Now, the examiner has said, if you take a classic example, the examiner pointed out IFRS 15 on revenue recognition, and said that one thing that they find is that when there's a question on revenue recognition, students feel the need to write everything they know. So they list all the 5 steps of revenue recognition. But actually, when you look at the question, it may be that just one little aspect of that is what's needed in the question. And that's all you need to state. So state it and apply it, because that's going to get you more marks. Now, as I said before, state, apply, conclude. That gives you a nice structure to how you deal with financial implications. Now, I can see that I've got a couple of questions already in the chat about how things get applied. So let's have a look at some examples here and see how the examiner might be testing things. Let's see if this answers some of your questions. So here we've got a very typical question number 2. Now, we said that question number 2 will have some ethics in here. And it's the ethics that I want to concentrate on, because this is what the examiner has said students are not answering well. So let's see what we've got in the question. Now, you know question 2 is going to be about ethics. As soon as you start reading that question, you've got your ethics mind on and you're looking for issues and why these issues might be arising. So we're told here that we've got a trainee accountant who has recently been employed by Delta to prepare the first draft of the financial statements. We're a little bit unsure on how to some of these issues raised by a director in the following email, how to respond to them. So you've asked a friend for advice. And it says your friend is also a trainee accountant employed by Delta. Now, we've already got an ethical issue here, folks, haven't we? It is not about confidentiality. This trainee accountant works for the same firm as me. This is not about confidentiality. What this is about, I'm a junior accountant, they're a junior accountant, and I'm asking them for technical advice. Am I demonstrating professional competence and due care by doing that? And I would say no. So that's the first point that we're going to raise up here, not confidentiality. Then we're told it is very important that the upcoming set of financial results shows a favourable financial performance. Again, we've got an ethical problem here. We have got somebody leaning on us to provide financial information that may not show accurately what's going on. Lack of integrity, lack of objectivity, lack of professional care, competence and care. Now, we're told that we will very shortly be seeking to raise additional finance by means of a fresh issue of shares. If the financial statements show a healthy profit, it will significantly increase the chances of a successful issue. Here we have the reason why somebody is wanting us to change the financial statements. Now, since you're a trainee, there are certain transactions of Delta which you might be unsure about. I will shortly specify accounting treatments which I would like you to do for these transactions. They may not be strictly following the accounting standards, but they will maximize our reported profits. This is screaming of lack of integrity, objectivity, and professional due care and competence. And it says it's more important than following the standards because we have to get this share issue right. Now, if you can't see at this stage in a question that we've got some problems here, then you need to go back and have a look at the ethics again. It says, I'd like you to follow the accounting treatments. I will specify completely. Your cooperation in this matter will be taken into account when the directors meet shortly to discuss salary and increases in annual bonuses. This is intimidation. This is basically saying, if you don't do what I tell you, I'm not going to give you a bonus. And it leads to some threats also to ethics. So how am I going to get my 5 marks? Well, I know somewhere in here I've got to talk about lack of integrity, lack of objectivity, and lack of professional competence and due care if I don't follow the accounting standards. But what I want to think about here is the threats that I'm getting that would lead to that. Here, I've got a huge self-interest threat. You know, they're threatening, I've got an interest in here, self-interest, to get a bonus. I'm not going to get a bonus if I don't do what they tell me. And I think the other big threat that's leading to this is intimidation. There are your 5 points. 2 threats, 3 breaches of the ethical code. Now, if we have a look at what the examiners said, let's see how they set this out. Now, you can see that they've got 4 sentences here, but let's look to see where the main points are. It says, first of all, and what I would always start with is the threats. I think what we need to do here is that you've been given a self-interest threat because you say, because Mr. Examiner, you can see that we've got a bonus here. There's a self-interest threat for me to lack integrity and objectivity and misstate these financial statements. So that's 2 marks. And then you're saying there's also an intimidation threat because the directors have told me that it's linked with my salary review, so they're threatening me effectively, and they're putting a lot of pressure on me because they're saying that the whole of the success of this share issue depends on this. So there's another 2 points where you can talk about lack of objectivity and self-interest. And somewhere in here, to get that final point, we need to talk about the professional competence and due care if I don't follow the accounting standards. You don't have to write a lot. You're going to mention as well, maybe, that we've got the trainee accountant. Do you remember that first little paragraph at the top when we said that we've asked our friend? Also remember the lack of professional competence and due care for asking somebody that doesn't necessarily know what they're doing. But do not talk about confidentiality. That's not what this is about. Now, oops, I think I've got a little bit too far here. Let's have a look at this one. Now, this one is a typical question 3. I've not given you the full question 3 here. I've given you a transaction out of question 3. And this transaction is all about foreign currency transactions. Now, immediately, when you think about foreign currency transactions, we think about IAS 21. And under IAS 21, we have to remember that when we have transactions that are in a currency that's not ours, the first thing we have to do is to translate them from their existing currency into our presentation currency, which will probably be dollars in the exam. The examiner will give you some exchange rates, and we are going to talk about exchanging at the spot rate. Then, if they are non-monetary items, that's inventory and property, plant and equipment, unless they're revalued, are not going to be restated at the year end. But if we have monetary items, payables, receivables, cash, loans, things that can be readily convertible into money, these do need to be translated at the year end at what we call the closing spot rate. Any movements in the value of those items is going to be reflected in the statement of profit or loss. Here we have a consignment of inventory that's been acquired from a foreign supplier, which they've called S. The invoice showed a total purchase price of 600,000 francs, and Epsilon paid 600,000 francs to S to settle the invoice at the end of April, 4 months later. Between January and March, Epsilon sold 75% of the goods purchased from S to a domestic supplier for a total invoice price of $120,000. Notice the different currencies here. The directors accurately estimated that at March, the inventory bought from S, which was unsold, had a net realizable value of $39,000. Now, you need to read these currencies really carefully, otherwise you're going to get yourself in a right pickle. And we can see down here that we've got some exchange rates at different dates. Now, I've not given you the full question, and what I didn't tell you is that the year end is March X5. And you can see that we've got here some exchange rates at the beginning of our financial accounting period on the day, 1st of January, that the transaction takes place, at the end of March, which is our year end, and then at the end of April, which is going to be the settlement date, and at the end of March X6. Now, you go to the requirement. I said to you earlier about making sure that you read the requirement in full. You've got one sentence here. Let's look at how many things the examiner is asking you to do. Number 1, using the information, explain and show how these transactions should be accounted for. Explaining is putting into words and showing how they should be accounted for, is telling me what the standard says I need to do with these. Now, this means that I need to put some measurement in here. What's the value that I'm attributing to these? And I've also got to explain how these are going to be presented. I'm going to tell the examiner the section of the statement of financial position that these transactions are going to go in. For my current year end and next year's year end as well. We've got loads of things in here we have to remember. So, what we're going to do, this is the examiner's response to this. You'll notice it's not actually that long, but remember, every single transaction has 2 sides. And you have to remember that if you're buying inventory on consignment, the 2 sides of this inventory is I've got inventory to record, and if I bought it on credit, remember the examiner said, I buy it on the 1st of January, X5, and I'm going to pay for it in April, X5, after the year end. So this item is a payable as well. Now I've got to record both of those. I'm just going to go back and remind you the question again. So I've got inventory here. Notice that I'm also selling some of it by the year end. Now the question didn't say just record the inventory and the payable. I'm going to tell them about that sale as well. I've got to explain to them what's going on with the sale. And I've also got to explain what's happening with the inventory at the year end and what happens when it gets settled after the year end. I'm going to use these exchange rates. So let's go back and let's have a look again at what's going in here. So the first part of this, in fact, the first 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs even, are talking about the inventory. I'm going to explain that on the 1st of January, X5, when I buy these goods, I'm going to translate those goods at the spot rate at that time, which is 4 francs to the dollar. So my 600,000 francs are going to be converted into $150,000. And I'm going to explain, I can either do a journal or I can put this into words. I am going to add that to my inventories and I'm going to create a trade payable for the equal sum. 2 sides. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until I get to the year end. Inventories are non-monetary items and will therefore still be at the same exchange rate on the day that I bought them. Remember that 75% of the inventories have been sold. So it's only going to be 25% of that 150,000 that will still be recorded at that 37,500 in the financial statements. The other 75% has been sold. So I'm just going to have because the question wasn't specific about inventory, let's talk about the sale. 75% of the 150,000 is a cost of sale, and that's going to be recognized as a cost of sale in the statement of profit or loss. And it's going to be compared to the sale proceeds of 120,000 to reflect the profit. What I then need to do, I'm now on the 6th paragraph down, is to take the inventory that's left and just make sure that it's being recorded at the lower of cost and net realizable value. IAS 2 says we need to record it at the low of the 2. Cost is the 37,500. The net realizable value is 39,000. I'm going to record it at 37,500. Now, I bet most of you, when you looked at that question, would have gone straight in and revalued the inventory, retranslated it, and talked about it being a non-monetary item. Remember the sale, remember the closing inventory as well. They tell you lots of things in the question. The other side of the double entry is to record the trade payable. This is a monetary item. Monetary items are recorded at the spot rate at 150,000. And if we still have that money outstanding at the year end, which we do, they need to be retranslated at the closing rate. We're going to translate that at the 3.8 francs to the pound, a dollar, and that means that we've got $157,895. Any movement in that payable is going to be recorded in the statement of profit or loss. And just to make sure that we're clear, at the year end of the 31st of March X5, we're going to record the liability at the year end figure. And sorry, I mentioned the monetary item here at the closing rate. When we get to, I should say, April X5, which is in the following year to March X6, we're going to work out the exchange rate at the date of settlement, and any movement from the year end to the date of settlement is going to go in the statement of profit or loss for the year ended March. Now let's go back here. Have I explained? Yes, I have. Have I shown how these should be accounted for? Yes, I have. I've put the values in. Have I told them where they can present them? Yes, I've explained that they're going to go in as liabilities and assets in the statement of financial position. And I've also explained about the exchange rates in the P&L. And have I covered both years? Yes, I have. So always go back and check all of those requirements. Now, the next one, question 4, is purely written. And you'll find that what the examiner will do is give you a list of questions. There will not be journal entries. The questions will be much more generic than that. So what you have to do is to make sure that you answer everything. We're told that in another of our subsidiaries, Rural, which operates a farming business, and they keep herds of cows, which it uses in the production of sale of milk, and a herd of sheep, which it uses to provide meat. I've not encountered this type of business before, and I want to understand how such business produces its financial statements. I would imagine it would be very difficult to fully represent the assets of a farming business in the financial statements, given the animals themselves are not always purchased, but born from a herd. Please help me. Now, this is only 6 marks. We've got 3 questions. So I think I'm probably going to be writing a couple of sentences for each. The first one says, is there an accounting standard which deals with the financial statements of farming business? Yes, there is. If so, what's its scope? Well, its scope is going to cover, it's IAS 41, and IAS 41 is going to describe in detail biological assets are cows and sheep. They are items that go through a transformation. And it also explains that from these, we can generate agricultural produce. Number 2, how are these assets, cows and sheep, recognized, measured, and presented? They are recognized at the time that they are either born or bought, if they're bought at market. They are measured at their fair value, less any transaction costs, and any movement between one year and the next with those values is going to go to the P&L. And they are presented as non-current assets in the statement of financial position. 2 sentences, possibly 3. I'm sure that the accounting standard which deals with inventories requires inventories to be measured at cost. How can we come up with a cost of milk and meat when they've not been purchased or manufactured? Well, you're absolutely right, Mr. Examiner. Yes, there is an accounting standard on inventories, and yes, it does say that we need to record at cost. But if items have been produced, we have to work out their value as their fair value at the time that they are harvested. And we will then record that as the equivalent of cost as inventory. Now, not a lot to write. It's lovely and structured, isn't it? Just make sure you cover all the requirements. So down here, you can see it's not a big answer for part 1. What we're looking at, they mention IAS 41. It's fine to say, is there a standard? Yes, there is a standard. So let's have a look at that one. It's 41, but you don't need to know the number. It's on agricultural activity. It talks about biological assets and explains that those are living plants and animals that go through a transformation. Question 2, how are they recognized, measured, and presented? Recognized, it says that they are recognized when they're born or bought. Number 2, they are measured at fair value, less costs of sell at the auction, and any gains or losses go through the P&L. And presented, they go as a separate category of non-current assets in the statement of financial position, unless we're going to keep them for less than a year, and then they'll be current. And let's talk about this point about inventory. How can it be measured at cost when we don't buy it? Well, agricultural produce is harvested. So we talk about being harvested. And at the point of harvesting, second paragraph, we value it at fair value, less cost to sell. And that's all we need to write in there. Nice structure to the answer. Now, before we go, let's have a quick chat about some strategies. One thing that you're going to need to do between now and then is to try and build in your study time. I appreciate some of you will be working full time and it can be hard. So what you just need to do is to plan your study time between now and the exam and try and allocate time to cover all topics with lots of question practice. Build in some downtime too. Everybody needs a day off every now and then. You need to build up your working knowledge of both consolidation principles and what the accounting standards say, as well as how to apply. Use the practice platform as much as you possibly can. You'll get quicker. You'll also learn to present your information in a lovely way to get the marker on your side. Remember, if a marker can't follow what you've done, they're going to be in a very bad mood when they're marking your paper. So help them as much as you can. Maybe spend a little time reading through some of the examiner's technical articles. You'll pick up again on some of the issues that students seem to get wrong. On the day itself, I appreciate some of you may have done exams recently, some of you may not have done. Get a good night's rest the night before. You need to think in the exam. You need to be able to really have a good understanding of the standards and apply them. So you need to read, and you can't read and apply if you're tired. So a good night's sleep. Arrive nice and early so that you can register in time and you're not panicking when you get in the exam. And during the exam, keep to your timing. 45 minutes per question. If you do not answer every question, you will not score full marks. Leaving a question blank is not going to be very helpful. So attempt everything, even if you don't attempt everything fully. And make sure that you've understood the format of the exam before you go in. One question I often get asked is, do I have to do the questions in the order that they come up, 1 to 4? And the answer is no. You do the question you can do best first. Often students find the consolidation is a good one to do because you get it out the way. But if that's not your bag, you do the other ones first. Just make sure that you stick to the timing and you answer everything. Now, let's have a little look at some questions. I can see there's a lot come in here, so I'm not going to be able to answer all of these. Okay, I've had a really good question here, actually, about how the written questions are marked in the exam. And it says, should we have nice, full, correct English? Well, remember, we're trying to communicate. What I would say is write in short sentences and don't try and use fancy words. I think the sensible thing to do here is to make sure that you can come across to the examiner. Stick to the points in the question and answer them as concisely as you can. Don't use words you don't understand, is what I would say. Just keep it nice and simple. Make 1 point per sentence, and that will make your English come across a little bit better if you find that sometimes you can't quite find the right words. This is another really good point as well. Talking about timing of exams. A really good question here says, somebody didn't pass, sorry about that, mainly due to the lack of time managing problems. In what questions do you recommend to avoid wasting such time? I think what I would strongly recommend in here is if you practice questions beforehand and time yourself beforehand, that will make you a little bit quicker. What I find is that students sometimes feel a little quite comfortable doing the consolidated financial statements because you haven't got to explain anything. And that sometimes means that you overrun on time. Practice those and get them done in 45 minutes. And then what I would do is when you're doing the written questions, I quite like to cut and paste the requirements and pop them into my word processor section. And then I break them down a little bit so that I've then got a heading and I answer everything. And it makes you write quite concisely under each point because you're answering the questions quite directly. So what I would do if you're struggling with time is to read the question, highlight the key points that you think you're gonna need, take the requirements, pop them into your answer section in your word processor, so you're then not flicking backwards and forwards to the requirement, and then you've got the question in front of you with the question paper with the problem and the question, and see if you can answer that a little bit more quickly. Again, I think it is probably question practice is what I would recommend in here. Another point that I've had down here is another really good question. You've got some good questions coming in here, folks. Another good question is asking, if in an exam we find that something was examined last time, does that mean it's going to be examined this time? And in particular, I suppose what you're thinking about is, if it was a statement of financial position in question 1 last time, is it going to be a P&L this time? Well, I think that really does depend. I would strongly say you don't question spot. I think just because a particular topic has come up before doesn't mean to say it's not going to come up again. And remember, because the questions themselves, especially questions 2, 3, and 4, are broken down into small sections, you could have a small part asked in that was asked last time. So don't question spot. And I would make sure going into the exam that you can do a consolidated statement of financial position and a consolidated statement of profit or loss. Remember that in a consolidated statement of profit or loss, the examiner could still get you to calculate the goodwill on acquisition at the beginning of a question. So don't ignore anything, would be my recommendation. Let's see. Oh, this is another good point. It says about the spreadsheet and the word sheet. Is it mandatory to split your answers between them? Now, your examiner has said, another great question, by the way, your examiner has recommended that when you're doing the consolidated statement of financial position, you're going to have to use a spreadsheet because that's what they give you. In questions 2 and 3, you're given both a Word document and a spreadsheet. The examiner has recommended, and this is what they would like to see from a marking perspective, that the wordy elements are put in the word sheet, and you then use your spreadsheet for workings and calculations which you can refer to. So what you could then do is, in your word sheet, put the solution and say, I think the value of your inventory should be this. And then if you refer to your spreadsheet, the examiner can then see where your workings come from. So if you want to use the word sheet only, that's fine. The only thing I would say is that you're then going to be using a calculator to calculate some of the numbers. And I think a spreadsheet might be a little bit quicker for you on some of the larger calculations. Just going to make sure I'm not repeating any questions here. Oh, here's another great question. Can I copy the requirement from the question to my workspace? Yeah, I do that. Often what I do is I take elements of, certainly when I'm looking at the exhibits in a question, I take little elements of that and I cut and I paste it. So I do Control-C and then I paste it onto my Word document with Control-V. And then that makes sure that that's been cut and pasted. And then I can use that, especially for requirements, I can write underneath and write my answer. So that should be absolutely fine. Oh, another good question. What's the fast tips for solving consolidated statements for groups? Well, I think group questions, fast tip is to practice some questions. I think what I would go back and do with these, if you're finding these a little bit tricky, because sometimes you find that you've got to do some consolidation techniques, and then the examiner goes and gives you some adjustments to make to the parent's accounts before you actually consolidate. Why don't you do those workings first? So what I would probably do is take the parent's figures and list the subsidiaries, so that you're then ready to add across, because that will then get you some aggregation marks. And what I would do is, in the pre-populated spreadsheet, just make sure that if you've got something like a statement of profit or loss, you might have to prorate if it's a mid-year acquisition. So make sure you do that, but put all the parents' figures in, put a column for your subsidiary. Remember, as I said before, in the statement of financial position, never prorate because it's a snapshot of the point in time. That gets you some marks. Then do your workings for the parent company's adjustments. So what you've got in there is maybe do some adjustments for things like, they might tell you that they've not accounted for a loan properly, or they've not impaired a non-current asset properly. Deal with that and correct the parent's figures. Then do your workings for your net assets, your goodwill, your non-controlling interest, and your retained earnings. pop those into your consolidated statement of financial position, add down, add across, add down. So get a nice structure to it. And when you're practicing them, do the same structure for every question. Parent plus sub, do your parent's adjustment workings, then do your consolidation workings, pop them on your spreadsheet, add across, add down, and you should then get a little bit quicker as you go through. Right, do we have any other questions here? I think, here's another good question. It says, what do you recommend for practice, the approval study practice kit of the past exam question, which is good or recommended? Well, I have to say that your exam kit will have most of the past exam questions on it. The only ones they won't have in there, I would guess, would be the most recent ones, because sometimes these are put on the platform too late after publication. So you should be able to do the ones in the practice kit. Maybe if you're a little bit short of time and looking at where we are now, I think I would probably recommend that you look at the platform, and because then you're going to be practicing straight away on the platform. And remember that every exam question has got exam paper has got 4 questions in it. So you've only got to do the last 2 years' papers, and you've then got 4 times by 4, you've got about 16 exam questions done already. So I would recommend that you probably want to do that if you possibly can. Okay. Is there anything else in here? Another question, are there specific standards that we should focus on more than any others in the exam? Well, I think down here, I would say that I would just take all of them, just use all of them. Right, I'm going to hand over now to Richa.
Hi, Jane. Yes,
Hi.
hope I am audible, right? Yeah, am I audible? Okay, great. Thank you. So I think students, you must have found the session really good. And but before we close the session, because I know we are quite very near to our time, to our 60 minutes for which we had this session. So, but I would like to play a quick poll for you to know if you know about our resources or not, if you know about their deadlines or not. So here is a small poll for you. Do you know the mock and debrief dates for yourself? When are they going to be released? Please select any one of it for me. I am expecting many more responses from you all, and will wait for few seconds more for your answers. Just a quick thing, there is nothing, I mean, you are not going to lose anything. What you are going to earn is that you will get to know the right date and time. So please do put the poll. That gives us also an idea that how far we have been able to communicate the information to you. So okay, we are getting, I'm just looking for 20-30 more responses, and then we will move to the next one. Great. So with the countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Here are the results. Okay. Okay, 15% of the students, they are saying 9th May and 16th May. So let me tell you that yes, 9th May and 16th May is the correct date. 9th May is the release date of June 25 mocks, and 16th May is the date of debrief videos release. We have the links available in the resource section of yours. If you click right now, it may happen that you may not see the mock right now, but yes, anytime during the day, this mock will be available for you to practice and see that where you stand, and that you will also get the answers which the way you should answer it in the exam. So that will also give you a good idea that how far you are prepared for it and what else you need to prepare for your paper so that you can pass with good scores actually. So with this, let's bring the session to the close. And I would like to remind you two things. First, resources are there in the resource section. Don't forget to take the links of them. And secondly, that you will get the recording link of this session as well. And also, a best tip, you can use the same registration link to watch the webinar again, recorded the version. So and also pick all the links from the resource section as well. So with this, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Jane, for extending your support. And also thank you very much to the team who have supported us at the back end to deliver the session successfully. Wish you all the very best for your June 2025 exams. Thank you.